Running a show up until kickoff for to Thursday, Sunday, and Monday nights primetime games. So excited for tonight's matchup. My Chicago Bears on the road in the nation's capital, taking on the Washington Redskins. With me tonight, I got my pal Nolan. Welcome, Nolan. How are you?
What's happening? Thanks for filling in for EMAC. You said the word gamers, so I feel like you've learned from him well.
Yeah, he's been a good teacher. Hopefully, I've been a good grasshopper. And usually you'll see me on Sunday evenings, but filling in Monday, I'm excited. No better game to talk about than the Bears on the road. So
yep, sounds good. EMAC was off. His wife runs marathons apparently, and she's like really good at it. So that was crazy. I was super impressed. I think I might have butchered your name last night, Eric. How do you say your last name?
No problem. It's Voivodich. So that J, I promise, if you just sound it out, it's how it looks. You turn that J into a Y. It's Voivodich. Us Croatians like to have silent letters in our name. So
nice. All right, no that's challenging. I got it next time for sure. So what's the buzz in Chicago? We got a 41-point total tonight. It looks like the lines moved a little bit. Bears now -5.5 instead of -4, where it was when I sprinkled a little cheddar a couple days ago. What's your initial take on this game?
Well, good for you. You got it at a better point than I did. I woke up this morning
the other way, so I'm on Washington. It's not
oh, good. Okay, all right. Yeah, that's a good bet. I think it's going to be an interesting game. I was talking with some folks, leading up to tonight. They're all equally excited, and this kind of just has a weird feeling to it. I think for some of us Chicago fans, I was looking back at last season. It wasn't until week 4 that the offense really started to click. And it hasn't clicked thus far. So going into Washington, who's actually been pretty competitive first couple weeks, Keenum has done a good job putting points on the board for him. So I'm cautiously optimistic for tonight, but just knowing that the Bears can occasionally have random games where they don't play well, and knowing that the offense hasn't lived up to expectations thus far, it's a little hesitant, but feel good. I think we're going to win. I think they do cover. I think it's a low-scoring game, but who the hell knows? It'll probably end up being a shootout, if my luck runs it. So,
well, that's great. We can defer to you for all Chicago Bears talk tonight, right? You're in Chicago. You got the lowdown on all the info.
I'll try my best not to be too much of a homer, and given a more subjective look. So, anyways, what are your thoughts? Looking at the game tonight, who you feel I think you mentioned Washington. Looking at it just from a high level, who do you like tonight?
Yeah, it's really hard game to get into. I feel like I don't have a great read for it. All these low scoring defensive matchups are always a little bit harder to kind of get a feel for. But so before we go on, I just want to mention our sponsor, Fantasydraft, as well. Fantasydraft sponsors all these live before lock shows, and we're super thankful to them. If you have a chance to go check out their site, they have really good packages right now where you can avoid paying rakes, which is a really good thing. So if you would rather pay almost no rake as opposed to a 15% rake, probably should head on over to Fantasydraft. They are bringing back the Hooters main event this week, up to a $28 entry fee, which is interesting. That should raise the total prizes. 700,000 in total prizes, 25,000 people. Get on over there, check it out. It's the best place to play right now if you don't like paying lots of rake. So yeah, getting back to this game here, I feel like when you have like a shootout and it's like Kansas City versus Baltimore or something, you can just eliminate the defenses, you can eliminate the kickers. Well, maybe not eliminate, but you can downgrade them, and you can just kind of find like different packages to pair with quarterbacks. Whereas games like this, it's like it feels just like it's going to be like a mutter or something. It's like it's going to be like 17-14. Like the touchdowns might be random. I don't know who I'm pairing quarterbacks with. Like fortunately there's some concentration on the Washington side of the ball that I kind of like from their wide receiver groupings and from their tight end, which makes it a little bit easier to predict. But the problem is the matchup is pretty tough. On the Bears side, very difficult to project what's going to happen with their wide receivers. Allen Robinson will be popular as always, and some of their other lesser targets have been kind of going up and down in terms of snap counts and routes run and stuff. So we'll dig into that a little bit as we get along here.
Yeah, it's you mentioned Washington. Some new faces, especially on the wide receiver side, that we will get into more that I'm interested in. the Bears, it's kind of I think you know what you're getting. So interested to see if there is kind of a breakout player that hasn't jumped out the first couple weeks. Uh, we'll see where that lands tonight.
Nice.
So go ahead.
So what are you doing with Mitch Trubisky here? Are you loading him up in your captain spot? It looks like we have him projected on Osmo as he's our highest projected player on the night. We have him projected for 17 points. However, he is also looks like he's going to be our most owned captain. We have him predicted for 23% captain share right now. Are you going to be loading Trubisky up tonight in the captain spot, or are you just peppering him in the util, or not even using him and going towards a more defensive matchup? What's your general take on that?
Great question. Mitch hasn't performed great as of the first 2 weeks. I'll be honest with you. I don't know if a lot's going to change tonight. So I'm not loading him up in the captain spot. I do want to include him in where I can, but I'm just not willing to invest what it costs, coupled with the high ownership and the fact that he just hasn't produced thus far. So I, more than anyone, want to believe that Mitch will have a big game tonight. I'm not super excited about him. Looking at some of the projections, and someone I am more excited about is actually one of his, two of his weapons. One of his targets, Allen Robinson, who's seen high targets the first couple weeks. While he did have a tough matchup last week, Chris Harris shadowing him. Great week one as far as targets goes and numbers, and I think he's pushing to find the end zone. And then if it is that slug it out defensive battle that I think a lot of people are projecting, David Montgomery is a great option. A little bit lower cost, found the end zone last week. Good chance that he could find it again, and I think his carries per game will continue to tick up as Matt Nagy recognizes it's important to value that running game. So I don't love Mitch. If we're looking at the QBs, I love some other guys in the Bears more. Keenum, who knows? He's thrown 5 TDs thus far, so we'll see where he goes. What are you thinking about the QB position?
Well, this is a tough one, right? Mitch Trubisky is so hard to peg. You don't know if you're going to get the Mitch Trubisky who tossed for 6 touchdowns against Tampa Bay last year and 350 yards. Or you're going to get the guy from the week before who threw 2 picks and threw for 220 against Arizona. So from week to week, you never know. He does strike me as a really a really good option for captain just in GPPs, just because he has the rushing upside. He's shown that ability to get to produce huge scores when it's all clicking, and as well you have a Washington team that has pretty weak coverage grade from PFF thus far. Josh Norman hasn't looked like himself. A lot of these other cornerbacks, they just got Aaron Colvin from the Texans, who was torched in week 1. So if this Washington team is susceptible, it is through the air. I don't hate the play. I think this is the case, though, where you're getting on a week too soon, not a week too late, because Trubisky's just capable, and Matt Nagy's capable of scheming him to success. We've seen it before, despite his failings as a quarterback.
Yeah, all good points. And again, he's likely to have probably the most points there. So if that's something that you want to get behind, I do like him overall. There's the cost there. So if you're thinking about Mitch, you're thinking about the QB position. Bears likely, defensively should stop Washington, so that gives them more, theoretically, it gives them more possessions, better field position, more chances to put the ball in. And to your point, is this the week where they do break out? We know he has the potential. Certainly has the potential to do it more on it with his legs too, which we haven't seen a whole lot of the first couple of games. So interested to see where they land tonight. And
yeah, exactly. And like you said, Allen Robinson is clearly the most logical choice to pair him up if you're gonna roster those two. One of them in your captain spot, one of them in your util, or vice versa. Allen Robinson has 20 targets thus far in the opening 2 weeks of the season, and every single other wide receiver and tight end on the Bears roster has 24 targets. So that should tell you how much of a focal point he's been in this offense. I'm expecting a Josh Norman shadow tonight. They have been using Josh Norman in shadow coverage a little bit, but he hasn't been the same quarterback. This is not the Josh Norman from 5 years ago where we were scared to roster him. He's allowed a 151 passer rating, 9 receptions on 13 targets thus far this year. Doesn't scare me at all. I think Allen Robinson can win that battle. Outside of Allen Robinson, though, it gets a little bit tricky because Anthony Miller, one of the most efficient receivers in the NFL last season, really hasn't done much this year. He has just 2 targets and 2 yards so far this season. Taylor Gabriel only ran 28 routes in week 2. Cordero Patterson. I always say his name wrong. Only ran just 5 routes last game, and then you have these running backs mixing in the passing game. So the problem with Trubisky is figuring out who to pair him with, and if you're going to pair him with Bears wide receivers, how many are you going to pair him with, or are you relying on his legs to generate those fantasy points?
Yeah, interesting points on the routes, especially too. I mean, last week the Bears really did commit to the run, even on a lot of third down situations where week one or historically Nagy would like to pass. So interested to see if they do commit even more to that. And that's what I was thinking about as I was putting lineups together for today and putting kind of a few different variations out there. Who is that second wide receiver? And because there hasn't been a lot of targets outside of Allen Robinson, and there hasn't been a lot of success altogether, it's really hard to say. If I had to make a bet for tonight on who that second person is, I'm going Taylor Gabriel, just for the simple fact that he's been on the field more than any other potential option. I think it's 90% of the snaps that he's been on the field. So theoretically, he should get more targets, and he has that big play capability. So if I'm looking at someone that maybe surprisingly has a big game, that second option to Robinson, I was looking at it tonight. I was thinking Taylor Gabriel, and also he's relatively cheap, all things considered. So
yeah, I like that call a lot, actually. Like I think it's rather than thinking of this as a 3 wide receiver tandem, this is more likely a 2 wide receiver tandem, just because Anthony Miller hasn't really done all that much. Taylor Gabriel is always an interesting play because he does have that like targeted air yards upside. We've seen him have some big games in the past as well. And then the rest of this Bears receiving group. Patterson didn't get a target, I think, last week, though he did have 2 rushes for 50 yards. And then the other guy I wanted to get your opinion on is Javon Williams, who is just $300 on DraftKings, 21 offensive snaps in week 2. He had 18 in week 2, 21 in week 1. He's always been a preseason standout. He's got some skills. Do you see Javon Williams getting carving out any role in this offense?
It's hard to say. They have to have the ball a little bit longer to give some of these alternative guys options, and they just haven't had the ball enough in the first couple of weeks, unfortunately. So while I do like what he can bring, and you shared some of those snap numbers, which are high for a guy in his position, and for the cost, sure, why not take a flyer on it? It allows you to spend money elsewhere, right? Do I see him as carving out a position in the offense? The answer is short no. There's just too many other guys that I look at that, they want to get the ball to. You mentioned Cordero Patterson. We didn't even talk about Tariq Cohen. We know they want to get him the ball. So there's just so many options and guys kind of similar. They want to get Taylor Gabriel going. Tight end position, Burton, he's coming back from an injury. We know they want to get him going. So Williams, I don't think you can count on him, but maybe, hey, if you're looking to take a flyer, want someone really cheap that can balance out, maybe you're playing both QBs, something like that. Why not, right? Take that option. You could see
exactly. Williams, big body target. He's 6'4", so you never know. Maybe they'll use him in the red zone. Ran 10 routes last week, 19 the week before that. I kind of like him as a $300 flyer on DraftKings, especially if you're going to pair up with some Trubisky lineups. The problem, as you said, though, is like when you're saving money on someone like Williams, who are you spending it up for? This isn't one of those lineups. This isn't one of those games where you've got like a bevy of really high priced guys that you're trying to fit in there, right? Like you're more than likely you're going to be able to find your Chris Thompsons, your Tariq Cohens, like all of these guys are priced so low. Adrian Peterson, 5,800 on DraftKings. So Trey Quinn, like super cheap. Miller. So there's the problem with playing someone like Williams on a slate like this is that the savings don't really add up to much because there are bargains everywhere else on the slate, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And to your point, there aren't a large number of high priced players. So while it is okay to take a risk here and there, you're probably able to get some of the better players for each respective team.
Do you know, is there anything happening with Anthony Miller? I just looked up some stats of his on PFF. He was so efficient last season. He had 117 passer rating when targeted, 5.2 yards after catch. He had some great separation numbers. I think he was top 5 in the NFL in separation and contested catch rate. All of those numbers just say like he should be taking the next step this year, and he hasn't at all. Is there anything out of Chicago that's any news about him that would lead you to believe there's a reason why?
I would love to say that I had some sort of birdie on the inside. I don't, at least regarding Anthony Miller, maybe elsewhere there. But, I don't honestly. I think it's just kind of victim of circumstances. I mentioned there's a lot of guys. You mentioned Javon Williams, Taylor Gabriel, Anthony Miller falls right in line. The Bears just haven't really spread the ball around because they haven't moved the ball a whole lot.
Yeah.
They haven't done a whole lot offensively. So it's they need that game to kind of, hopefully kind of explode, get the monkey off their back a little bit to say, hey, we can put up points, and then there's more opportunities for guys like Anthony Miller to maybe contribute or be a regular contributor for your weekly. But there isn't anything on the inside other than the fact we haven't had enough plays and enough opportunities to spread the ball around to guys. And
Yeah,
I look back I was watching some clips of Mitch, calling running plays, and they're showing different views and breakdowns, and there's he definitely has a bit of that. I don't want to say his name and jinx us for tonight, but that Jay Cutler syndrome with Brandon Marshall, where he gets locked in, Cutler would stare down Marshall. Trubisky seems to be doing that a little bit with Allen Robinson. And while I do like A-Rob, I think he's a great player, it's important that he spreads the ball around, and there's probably opportunities where he's had better matchups, with guys like Miller or guys like Gabriel, and just hasn't gotten the ball, coupled with, the offense just hasn't moved the ball. So no, nothing inside, but who knows? Maybe we can see a breakout for him tonight, maybe someone to throw in and say, hey, we know that he, looking at the stats from last year, he has been a good contributor. So why not tonight?
Well, on the plus side, if you do roster him, you're probably going to get some serious ownership discount. I'm just looking at his numbers right now, and it ain't pretty. We do not have him projected for much ownership at all. So that's interesting to me. I think for GPPs, if you want to load up on him and get over the field, I think we have him at around 1% or 2%, which maybe that number's off, but I can't expect that there's much ownership there for Miller. What are you doing with these tight ends today? We got Trey Burton, we got Shaheen, we got Ben Brownecker from Harvard. All of these guys kind of getting a equal snap share. Burton led the team in snaps with 43%, and I think all three of them were kind of even in routes run last week. This is a complete stay away from me. Burton is active. I just see these guys as splitting time, so I'm not going to get to any of them tonight. What about yourself?
Great question. I was looking at the tight end position for the Bears tonight, and I'm right there with you. I am not feeling really any of the Bears tight ends or tonight. Burton, well, I think he's a great option, and that's one of the reasons the Bears offense has struggled up to this point. This season is that Burton hasn't really gotten involved. He has been that safety valve for Mitch historically. Coming off the injury, worked his way back in last week. So I don't love him, and I don't love him for the price that he's going at. That said, who knows? He's probably working his way up from a snaps perspective. So again, don't love the tight end position at all for the Bears tonight. Shaheen, he's big boy, but not much playmaking ability there. And for Burton's cost, I don't love it, but who knows? He could see a projection up in snaps, which maybe gives him a few more targets. But no, not liking that position at all for the Bears tonight.
Yeah, I think $2,800. He's seen his price tag go up. Shaheen's probably my favorite play of those three, just based on price, because Burton's $6,000, and to me that just seems like a bad play given his current snap rate and his injury status. As well, you have a fairly bad matchup on the other side. Washington's been very good at defending the tight end. They were 6th ranked team in defending the tight end in DVOA in 2018, and they gave up the 9th fewest fantasy points to tight ends. So those are two things I think as well going against the Bears tight end grouping. So I'm with you there. I'm just staying away from them. Are you getting to any of these? Let's dig into the juicy Bears running backs here, because I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Tariq Cohen, on David Montgomery, on Mike Davis. All three of these guys look to be in play tonight. Mike Davis is perhaps the wild card, given that he had a lower snap count last week and maybe being phased out of this offense in favor of Montgomery. What's your take on these three?
Yeah, great question. So Bears running back wise, I think we saw I think where they want to go last week. Week 1 was kind of an oddity. So I was seeing Montgomery getting the uptick in carries last week, Davis less, and Montgomery getting those goal line carries, which what we know it's the most important. Yeah, I do see that to continue. He was a rookie. I don't think they wanted to put too much on his plate right away. He is the clear lead back, certainly from a talent perspective, and I think where the Bears like him. So if I'm going with a running back, and I don't mind him in the captain spot either. David Montgomery, I like him to find the end zone. Who knows? He throwing a few catches, could sneak in the end zone twice tonight. And the Bears passing attack hasn't been great. I expect them to lean on Montgomery heavily tonight.
Yeah, that makes sense. We saw him we're starting to see him get a little bit of work in the passing game. He had four targets through 2 games thus far. Uptick in snaps. His snap percentage, I have it down here. I wrote it down because I knew I was going to forget it. He went up in snaps from 38% to 44% in week 2. Mike Davis went down to 25% after getting about 35 the week before. And Tariq Cohen went from 70 to 38. So that's a little bit concerning for Cohen. One of the weird things that I looked up and when I was researching the Bears tonight was just how strangely they use not strangely, but how much they adjust their offensive scheme depending on their matchup. And one of the things I noticed was Tariq Cohen ran a lot of routes in week 1, and everyone was wondering whether or not he was going to be a slot receiver and whether or not he should get wide receiver eligibility. Not so much in week 2. His snap count dwindled, and he did not run a lot of routes out of the slot. So I don't know if this is the kind of game that they're going to scheme him and try and pass him the ball, or if they're going to go back and just continue to rely on Montgomery.
Yeah, great points. And I was actually thinking the same thing about Cohen after week 1. They use him so heavily in the passing game, lining up, putting a lot of short passes to him. And I do like him catching the ball. He does need to get the ball handed to him a few times, although with his size, it is tough for him to kind of bust out of tackles. He's great at running around, but you can't run around everybody in the NFL. Everybody's fast out there. So I like Cohen catching it. They like to use him in creative ways. They like to use a lot of guys. So I don't love Cohen. I'm starting him across the board by any means, but I do expect him to catch a handful of balls. He may sneak into the end zone. There's always that chance as well because he is the punt. Main punt returner for the Bears, and returns kicks when there's the opportunity. That he does bust one there, right? Made the Pro Bowl last year for that. So, given that extra, added potential value while it's rare, I do like Cohen from that perspective. Davis, who knows? He saw more usage week 1. I think Montgomery, takes the lion's share of that, and then Cohen, depends on where you're at from a value perspective or how much money you have. Should see some usage. This week, who knows, right? To your point, it is very much a matchup-based game. And based on situation, based on where the Bears are having success, we'll see where Cohen lines up tonight. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. Mike Davis, the one nice thing about him is that he's been priced down. He's just $1,800 for week 1. I'm pretty sure he was 4,000 in week 1, I think, for that showdown game. So he's seen a huge reduction just based on that. And that, I think, to me, makes him viable as a punt. I'm not itching to get him into the lineup, but he's certainly one of the better values on the slate and one of the better values in Awesomo's rankings as well. So I'm in on him, but I think Montgomery probably the play tonight. Washington as well, bottom 10 in the NFL in receptions allowed to running backs and yards allowed to running backs last year. So another tick in the column for Tariq Cohen. And then your guess is as good as mine if Cohen's going to be used out of the slot in a wide receiving or in a receiving role tonight, or if he's not going to be. So that's just a trend that can probably go back and forth. And looking at the ownership here, it looks pretty sharp on him. It's pretty matching the field, kind of where we have him ranked. So not a huge edge there with Cohen, and kind of a similar situation for Montgomery as well.
You know what? One thing I do want to point out as I was looking at Davis's numbers, week 1. When we saw Cohen lined up more as a wide receiver, it created more opportunities for Davis actually in the backfield. He did catch 6 passes in week 1. So, while those numbers decreased in week 2, and who knows what the Bears and Matt Nagy have planned for week 3, just wanted to point that out there for fans in case they weren't aware. knowing that the Redskins do give up so many yards and points to opposing running backs.
That's a great point too, right? Sometimes sometimes you'll see correlations between players depending on the scheme and depending on the game plan, right? So it could be that like you might think about rostering Cohen. We don't know, the information's not quite out on this yet, but you might think about the future about maybe rostering Cohen and Davis in the same lineup on a showdown slate if they're going to be used in tandem the way they were in the Packers game. Of course, this could all be moot, and it could just be a case of them trying to get Montgomery more and more involved here because it sounds like they do really want to carve out a workhorse role for him. So, any thoughts on the defense, special teams, or kickers tonight for the Bears?
Well, I got my Eddie Pinheiro jersey on number 15 for our Bears.
Really? Wow.
Flying off the shelves. These are flying off the shelves here in Chicago. I had to pay twice face value for this thing. No, I'm kidding. But
can I ask you, why is it that no one in Chicago or anywhere in the American media will admit that that kick was blocked last year? They've ruined Cody Parkey's life. And the kick was blocked. There's a hand on it. Why is he out of a job? Because he got a kick block? That's crazy.
Well, hold on now, Nolan. I was actually at the game where he missed, was it 4 field goals? Hit the crossbar twice, 2, 3 times. So many.
I'm looking up his numbers
so many times. Now. If you're a soccer fan, you think he would do was doing the crossbar challenge, right? I mean, it wasn't a situation where it was one kick, and yes, they did get a finger on it. It was multiple over the season. And we knew going into the playoffs that was going to probably come back to haunt them, right? They're a defensive team. They're going to play close games. You got to have a kicker you can count on. On the kicker note, so I want to jump back to defenses before we get too crazy about it. Because Pinheiro does have a bit of an injury tonight. So I do want to mention that if we're on the injury front, there aren't too many injuries tonight. Jordan Reed is out. And we knew that going in for Washington. Otherwise, not too many injuries to worry about from an offensive perspective on their end. Bernard Pinheiro does have a bit of a knee/oblique. I guess he hurt himself lifting weights this week. I don't know if it was on the leg extension machine or what he was doing. As the kicker, you would hope he wouldn't hurt himself in the gym, but that's what it sounds like. So he sounds like he's good for field goals. I don't know if that means they won't test him on things beyond 45, 50 yards. Who knows? Week 1 they didn't. Week 2 they did, and he backed it up, but that was in Denver where we know it's a lot easier. Going back to the Bears defense, that was the initial question. I do like the Bears D tonight. They are a bit, I don't want to say overdue, but they're a bit due for a big game. They have a lot of great players, all pros at every level of the team. But Washington's been sneaky good, and they've put points up on 2 good defenses in Dallas and Philly. So, while I do like them, I think some people like them even in the captain spot. I saw a few comments earlier. And feel free to throw in comments and questions. We'll try to get to them before the end of the show. I like the Bears D tonight. I don't love them, but for the cost, for the price, and the fact that they're probably due for a pick six or a sack fumble type thing, I'm firing up in a couple different lineups.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with that. I mean, you got Case Keenum quarterbacking. This is the best defense in the NFL last year. If you look at their DVOA stats, it's just nuts. They were number 1 against number 1 wide receivers, number 3 against number 2 wide receivers, number 4 against other wide receivers, number 3 against the tight end, and number 10 against the running back. So this is one of the best defenses. I think they'll probably regress a bit from last season, but I got no problem firing them up in the captain spot. Of course, you have to think about lineup construction if you're going to do that. That likely means you're going to pair them up with David Montgomery, and then your guess is as good as mine as to what the best lineup construction would be. But we've seen it work before. We saw it with I think Jacksonville was the captain pick the other night. So it's definitely possible that can win you a tournament. It looks like we have them projected for 2% in the captain spot right now, and we're giving them about a 4% chance of being the top scoring play on the night. So you get a little bit of leverage there. All right, well, we got about 15, 20 minutes left before this lock. So before we move on to the Washington and discuss some of their fantasy options, just a quick word about Osmo.com. We have a lot of tools out this year, some new tools that if you haven't used yet, you should probably go check out. My favorite new one is the Top Stacks tool, which I've been referencing a little bit throughout this show. What we have is basically we assign a captain ownership to the player, or we have their ownership projection, and then we assign a number that we think that Awesemos projections are giving out to how likely that player is to be the top scoring player on the slate. So sometimes it's really, really helpful because you'll have a huge discrepancy between our projection of their likelihood that they're a captain and their ownership on the slate, especially last night as well. So that happens from time to time, and it is very helpful. I suggest you come on over to Awesemo.com and sign up. We got packages starting as low as $3.95 per week. So we've got a great Slack chat. NBA season's coming up, NHL season's coming up. Just go get a full package and come hit us up on Slack.
Awesome.
That's my spiel. Washington. Let's get into this Washington offense.
The Redskins. Yeah, I had to do some research on the Skins for tonight because they got some younger players that are contributing at a high level early on for them. Starting at we'll start with the quarterback position, but I'm interested to talk about the wideouts as we get to it later. Case Keenum, 5 touchdowns through 2 games, both against solid defenses. How are you feeling about Case coming in tonight?
I'm not super excited about him. I thought of him as a contrarian play because I didn't think he would get a lot of ownership tonight, given that he's going up against the Bears defense. Surprisingly, he's getting a lot more than I thought. So I'm a little less likely to put him in this spot. We're looking at about 13% captain ownership for Case Keenum right now, which is a little bit high for me, to be honest. I kind of figured he'd come in around 5%. Apparently, people are high on this Washington offense. So I'm personally gonna, if I am gonna go Case Keenum, I'm gonna do some full Washington stacks and then maybe bring it back with some David Montgomery or with some just a couple options on the Bears end and kind of go all in on that one. But I don't know. I don't have a great read on Case Keenum, to be honest. I feel like his career numbers are pretty mediocre from a fantasy perspective. His career high in touchdowns was that year with the Vikings 2 years ago, and that was just 22, and he had 3,500 yards. So he's not going to get to play the Philadelphia Eagles secondary every week where he's going to put up 380 yards. This is a much tougher defense. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears D had their way tonight.
Yeah, we shall see. It's he's been competitive against them, and Case Keenum's got a track record of being a solid QB. I don't love them tonight. Again, for the price as well. I think the Bears deep should have their way with them. But I always like to kind of take one random lineup, put it out there. What does my gut tell me? What do the numbers tell me? And then one where, hey, we know this is the NFL. We know there's a lot of parity, and there's always just kind of those games where things don't go the way you think. So I went with Keenum there in a captain spot. Where you mentioned he's at 13%. He's below actually Allen Robinson from a captain's start position for our projections go. So interesting there. So not loving Keenum, but as you look at some of his weapons and some of the guys that I'm actually excited about talking about, let's start, if we don't mind, let's start at the wide receiver position. We'll get to it maybe afterwards. I'm really excited to go there. Who do you like? We got some interesting new contributors for them. Terry McLaurin. I'll say these names in case you haven't watched Washington and you don't know who these people are. Terry McLaurin, big contributor early on. Trey Quinn, contributor early on. We know Paul Richardson from his days in Seattle, but those three, they're top 3, not really guys that are home, names that people know at home.
Yeah. So the first and most important question is, where do you stand on the nickname debate for Terry McLaurin? Are you team Scary Terry or are you team McLaurin F1?
I'm going to go with McLaurin F1, although Scary Terry it's got a nice ring to it.
Yeah. It's McLaurin F1. That's the way to go. Scary Terry, I've got too many Rick and Morty memories in there, so I'm all over it. I really like this wide receiving group, and one of the attractive things about rostering Case Keenum tonight is we've seen a really concentrated snap count for these Washington receivers. So we have Trey Quinn, Terry McLaurin, and Paul Richardson all above 82% snap counts. Those numbers are LA Rams-ish, so it makes your choices when you're stacking a little bit easier. I would expect Paul Richardson to fall a little bit under-owned compared to those other two. McLaurin's priced up like he's a number 1, so this is the Draftkings isn't messing around with his pricing, and then Quinn is priced down. He's a great bargain, not the upside of McLaurin. Some stats about McLaurin. I've got He has 3 targets of 20 yards so far, of 20 plus yards so far this season, and he leads the NFL in targeted air yards at 51%. So if you are looking for a sneaky captain pick and you are buying into it, McLaurin has that GPP winning upside. He's a home run hitter that can get behind a defense anytime. So I like all 3 of these guys. McLaurin is my favorite. I think he's maybe primed to make a breakout. And one random interesting fact I have is that like all of these receivers and cornerbacks from both sides of the team are super small. We have like all 3 of the Washington wide receivers are like under 6'1" and 190 pounds. And then all the Bears DBs are small. So we'll see who wins that battle. I think usually the edge goes to the DBs there, but it's kind of an interesting matchup. Usually you got like one beefy wide receiver that's gonna be able to box out some of these corners in the red zone. But
Yep. Yeah, it'll be interesting. You mentioned McLaurin, definitely a name to look for tonight. Just from a timeshare perspective, target share perspective, he's a 3rd-round pick, rookie out of Ohio State. So they obviously saw something they liked. It's not like he, was playing at some random small school and, they found him and he's a late pick. It's someone they had their eye on. What I did want to mention, and I was looking at the stuff for tonight's game, was our boy Trey Quinn. One thing that I found interesting, if you didn't know this, he was Mr. Irrelevant from the 2018 draft. So he was the last overall pick, and he's in a lot of lineups. He's in 20, projected to be 22, almost 23% of lineups tonight. The last pick in the 2018 draft. So you never know who's going to be a contributor. I found that interesting. Here's a guy that started his college career at LSU, moved on to SMU, got picked late, and he's contributing. He's averaging about 4 catches, roughly over 30 yards, and has a score on the season. I did find it interesting that while he's outproduced Paul Richardson, he's going for $1,200 less on average. So something to keep an eye on, Trey Quinn, and he does return punts for them. So bit of a dual threat, something we mentioned about Cohen. Keep your eye on Quinn, cost, punts, and he's got a high caliber. Plus, who doesn't love rooting for the underdog, right?
I like it. I like it. Yeah, all 3 of these guys. Most routes per game, Trey Quinn so far. And he's also top 10 in the NFL in cushion. I don't know how predictive that stat is, but it's usually a good sign if you're pretty good in cushion as well. Paul Richardson also doing really well in cushion. I don't know if that's a because they played the Eagles secondary or what, but so those 2 are looking pretty good. I think if you're gonna stack Case Keenum, you're gonna need to grab at least 2 of these guys. And then possibly tight end. I guess we better get moving here. We got about 7 minutes before lock. Vernon Davis, general thoughts here? Any takeaways? Looks like Jordan Reed's career is in jeopardy right now. So Vernon Davis, the man, and in Washington. And then we've also got Jeremy Sprinkle. Did I get his first name right? I was always.
Yeah, you did. I'm working on. I had a bit of a lighting issue here, but I'm working on it out right now. Sprinkle's right. I don't know that I love Sprinkle tonight. Vernon Davis. He's been an interesting, contributor for Washington for a long time, and I don't expect to see that changing. I do like Davis tonight. I think he probably gets his, and knowing that they're going to be dumping the ball off, I think he could have a good night for the Redskins tonight.
Where'd you go?
Before we jump off too quickly, can we go over to the running back position for Washington? Some interesting plays there, depending on, again, where you think tonight's game's going to go. If the Bears are going to have the lead, if you think, Washington is going to be competitive, and someone like AP can be, a player for them. What are your thoughts about the running back position?
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of game script dependent. If you're going to go, if you think the Washington's going to have a lead, then you gotta roll with AP, and they're probably trying to run the ball down their throats. They're at least a little bit weaker in the run. The Bears' deep run defense is at least a little bit weaker than their pass defense, though that doesn't really say a lot. Chris Thompson, if Washington's behind, then he's probably going to see a lot of work. One interesting note from the last 2 weeks is that with Darius Geis out in week 2, Chris Thompson's snaps went down from 65% to 45% share, mostly at the expense of Wendell Smallwood, who saw a surprising 26% snap share in week 2. Only 2 targets, but it could mean that he's starting to get some traction in this offense. I kind of like him as a really low-owned GPP flyer for if you want to pop him in a lineup or two. He's $1,800 too. He's not cheap. He should probably be about 200. We've seen him on the Eagles just pop up every once in a while and take one to the house. So if you're looking for a flyer in that play or a flyer for a GPP, I like Smallwood. If you like the Washington to be coming from behind, you got to go with Thompson. If you like them coming from coming from ahead, you line up construct with Peterson.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I think that's all good points. I get this like weird feeling. We only got a few minutes left. Adrian Peterson, if you're a Bears fan, if there was any out there, while it was with a different team in a different decade, probably, he has torched the Bears in his career. And something about Adrian Peterson playing against the Bears in a big game, Monday Night Football, I just have like this weird feeling in my stomach. I'm having flashbacks of his days in Minnesota. Who knows? But chances are Thompson gets a lot of the workload and catches a lot of passes. Peterson, if he sneaks one in early, otherwise I think he's pretty quiet night. But yeah, he's killed the Bears historically, and I just have like this concern about it. So moving on from the running back position, which we've got just a couple minutes left. As you look at like the defense, the kicker, some of those last other positions for Washington, is there anybody that you're throwing in the lineup? Are you playing their defense at all, knowing Mitch is struggle at all, or is this like a total stay away situation?
Washington, yeah, I think that's probably a more contrarian play. Actually, I kind of like it for large GPPs because Trubisky has shown a propensity for totally inaccurate play from time to time, right? And these Washington DBs are still decent. At least they've got some name cachet. I don't know if they're any good these days, but if Josh Norman, you got Landon Collins back there, like you've got some playmakers on this defense, and it's certainly possible that they could be a sneaky play. I'm not like super high on them or anything, but I think if you wanted to get another lineup in where you're rostering the Washington D, you just got to think a lot about roster construction. But I mean, we are running out of time pretty quickly here, so
yeah, we're getting
those last minute lineups in. We got about 2 minutes left. Thursday night slate, though, I am back with Ben Rasa and Alex Osmo Baker. What's the Thursday night game this week? I haven't even looked at it yet.
You know what? I'll tell you, as someone who hasn't looked, it's myself. I've been dialed in for tonight's game. But you know what? Something tells me I was looking at my season long, and I know that I had someone playing on Thursday night. I should know this. You know what? It is
Bears and Packers, Packers and Eagles. Our own lobby.
It was the Eagles at Packers. Interesting. Green Bay. This is their second Thursday night game. They played opening night with the Bears. That was a Thursday night.
Yeah. Just Thursdays all over the place. All right, we got to get out of here, and you got football to watch. So join us on Thursday. We'll be breaking down the Packers and Eagles. That's actually a good game, which is more than we can say for the last Thursday nighter, where it was about a turn-off after 15 minutes. So thanks so much for joining us tonight, and we will see you all soon. Enjoy the game.
Bear down.